Hello, my name is Rich Howard, owner of Architectural Builders Supply. In this video is to bring you a closer look at the Locknetics 653 series of key switches. I've got a 653-0505 here. I've got the same thing with an NS version, which is just an option on the faceplate. And this video is going to serve as a video for all of the 653 series because they almost the functionality of the core key switch does lots of different possibilities. What you don't get right out of the box is the ability to do a double pull, double throw scenario. So the micro switches that are included are single pull, double throw type switches. And in the base model, other than not getting an extra set of micro switches to be able to do double pull, double throw, you're not getting the different faceplates, obviously. But the core functionality starts out uniform amongst really all of them. So the 653 series key switch, and there is a link below this video to the installation instructions, both an older version and this newer version, which I think is dated 2017, which comes, obviously installation instructions will come with the hardware. This is, it's dated 2013, in fact, and is the one that's on the manufacturer's website, so is the most current. However, there is a typographical error in the on the back side of two of them, which I'll point out now. These two functions that my fingers are at, the 0405 and the 1415, the black arrow side, those should say maintained beneath them. It should say maintained right here and maintained right here. Having pointed that out, should you bump into that, it's a typo. It can only be a typo. Now, what is the 653 key switch? Well, it gives you the ability to control a micro switch with a key, or in fact, a couple of micro switches. And that's what this does. Why would you need that? Well, you need to have controlled access, key control access to something. You might want to turn off an alarm. You might want to energize a lock set. You might need to signify to a console that some activity has occurred on something. A door, really, is what it is. You might imagine lots of different ways to use a key switch. But generally, you'll see it where you need to, with key control, interrupt something or maintain something to pass through the doorway. I've seen key switches that will allow key control into a laboratory scenario where they're going to temporarily interrupt the power to the lock set to be able to enter, or conversely, well, I had said interrupt power. That would be very typical because it's a maintained switch and then you open the circuit. It could also be to close a circuit, to allow something to occur, something to lock, or something to give status to something. Because there are so many different ways that you can wire different pieces of hardware with micro switches that on board can be either normally closed or normally open. What exactly it is that you are controlling, especially the ability to do double pull, double throw. So you'll have four micro switches, either normally open or normally closed. You can control lots of different potential scenarios with this key switch. And I think a common application for a key switch could very easily be, you have a door that is emergency egress or maybe delayed egress. And there's an annunciator on the door where if the contact, maybe there's a contact or maybe a bolt position switch, or there could be a switch, a micro switch in the pad, the push pad of the device that says activation. And then an annunciator circuit would close, and the annunciator would sound, that key switch could be used to turn off the annunciator because I want to leave. I'm authorized to exit. I'm exiting. I'm turning off the annunciator. That could be it. But a key switch would be just like the ignition in your car too, I suppose. You know, turn the key. It will close the circuit, allowing the battery to power the starter solenoid, or I'm not an automotive expert, but, you know, and then, you know, the starter is able to, you know, make the car begin to run, would be an example, I think, of a daily example of a key switch where you might come into it. Now, let's begin this video with a review of the included installation instructions. Now, let's get on with the installation instructions. The documents, the older one that's there, we're just going to leave that there and not necessarily be concerned with it. Let's start this with a review of the included components. Okay, first of all, there's no mortise cylinder included. You need to supply one or order one from us and we'll supply it. It's an 1.25 inch length standard mortise cylinder, would be typical, with a standard cam. Schlage has their cam numbers included in the installation instructions. If you're not using a Schlage cam, standard cam is what you want. That's just simply what you want. So, regarding the cylinder, you're going to get the anti-pry feature. This is called an anti-pullout tab, a very thin piece of metal that you can remove the cam off the back of your cylinder. Install this down and then put the cam back on and screw it down. This will work to help reduce the potential for extracting the cylinder out of the housing, which would be a bad thing because then you could certainly operate the cam with a finger at that point. Okay, so you don't want to be able to have that. So you're going to get the anti-pullout tab. Okay, you're also going to get some other pieces that are here. And we're going to go over them as they're mentioned. You're going to get a stop pin. Actually, in fact, you'll get 2 stop pins. We're going to go over what that is as well. You're going to get a stop magnet. Okay. You will also get a set screw that you're going to need to hold the cylinder into the body. And that cylinder, that black set screw there is the item. And when the cylinder goes into the cavity, you'll run the set screw in the side, and a standard cylinder, of which I happen to have one here. This client's job calls out for 2 units. Mortise cylinders, this is an 1.25 inch standard cam, will have these grooves cut in the edge of them. So what you're dealing with is that set screw seating into that groove so that the cylinder isn't removed. However, it's just a set screw that is seated into a groove, which is why the anti-pull tab is such an important part. Now, generally what happens is when you tighten that set screw, it actually will divot into the side, because this is brass. It'll divot into the side of it, making it not... If you're going to try to pull that out, I wish you luck. They don't come out easily. However, it can, of course, be done, and that anti-pull tab will surely make the job far more difficult to pull it out. You're then going to get a couple of screws that you are going to use to secure, of course, the faceplate down to the gang box, then wrapping up our visual tour. And there will be, by the way, 2 set screws. The other set screw is buried into the package with the spanner wrench that will allow you to use the snake eye style security screws that are included with the package as well. Okay, we've gone over our visual tour of the components that are included in the box when you open it up. And the one thing we've not covered is the 653. That is a full-size switch plate. Okay. Changing the part number, such as NS, is going to give you a different switch plate. If you had a jam installation, you're probably going to need a smaller switch plate. And just be mindful that as the part number changes, so does the options, meaning the switch plate, meaning the way that it's internally configured, etc. Now, let's push back onto the installation instructions. Okay, now pushing on with the installation instructions. We've got the cylinder with the anti-pull tab, the installation instructions regarding installing that, and then setting the unit, the cylinder into the housing, referring to the set screw. They only refer to one, but our packaging certainly has two in it, and I would very much encourage you to use both, although the installation instructions refer to one. There is no mention to of the anti-vandal resistant type of screw package that's here. As a result, I can't say that this is always included. I would be very tempted to say that it is, however, because a key switch, if it's going to come with the anti-pull-out tab, there probably should be some consideration as to not so easily backing the screws out as well. So I would imagine that it's included. Now, it also includes the screws to hold the faceplate on. That we've discussed. That will go onto the tapped hole in the jam or into the gang box, whatever you're working on. Now they do tell us, let's skip over the switch installation and just talk about the prep for the installation instruction, or the physical size. So what they're talking about is remove material to a depth of 1 3/4 deep, and then you're going to create a rectangular preparation in the frame, in the wall, whatever you're installing it to, assuming that it's going to, if you're going to be drilling and tapping that 632 thread, you'll be probably putting it down to a jam, a mullion, something that's there, or bullard post, whatever it might be, I suppose. 1.5 inches wide, 2 7/8 overall height. You've got the locations to drill and tap the holes for, which will be a relationship of these two holes between my finger and thumb. Okay. Drill 4 1/4-inch holes, jigsaw cut the 4 holes, and you're good. Now, the switch configuration. You can have an ATS switch on board, which is an anti-tamper switch, which is a switch that's going to be in the device that, should the cover be removed, basically, it will take that open contact and close it, is what it'll do. That's what will end up happening. The definition of the micro switches is here as well, and they can be normally open or normally closed, depending on how they're wired. You got the black common. You got your normally closed and normally open. This model has 2 micro switches in it, black, red, and white. Okay. You'll use 2 of those 3 wires, depending on what your requirements will be. I would think that you want to have your annunciator concept earlier set so that it's normally open. So that if you've got the switch thrown into a maintained position, it closes the circuit, allowing the annunciator to open should, let's say, the contact be broken, or the micro switch and the push pad, that sort of thing, communicate back. But if you key switch it, to open that circuit, there you go. So you've got the ability on board to handle either of those. On the back side of the installation instructions, it talks about the key switch comes with all of the parts necessary to make any of the functions listed down below. And the functions down below basically allow you to create a counterclockwise or a clockwise rotation of the key to give you a maintained, momentary, maintained, momentary sort of configuration. You can do that in all of those circumstances. You can set the part so that it will only turn in one direction with the stop pin. And the only thing that you will likely need, or that it's possible that you will need, will be additional micro switches, which is a part number P653059. And the micro switch is down in here, and we're gonna show what that micro switch looks like in a little bit. So if you're going to do an installation where you need double pull, double throw, you have to order the micro switches, and you need to order 2 because it says you can only have 1, 2, or 4 micro switches installed. Well, you may not need, if you need to go to 4, you have to order 2, is the bottom line. The way that the inside plate is configured, you can't have 3 is not recommended, is what it says. In summary, the key switch uses magnetic springs to activate. The setting of the stop magnets on the inside of the housing that we're about to get into determine whether it's momentary or maintained on the micro switches. So the next part of this video is going to discuss the inner configuration of the switch so as to achieve these momentary or maintained settings. Now let's ease into the setting up of the key switch to determine how it's going to function. So on page 2 of the installation instructions, it calls our attention to, in the upper right hand corner, how to manipulate the item. Magnets can be removed, flipped, and reinstalled using a steel tool as shown below. Let's study exactly what that means. And let's review the function that we have. If you recall, we had an 0505 function that we have here. Now, according to the installation instructions, if you're looking at the back side of that, you see that a counterclockwise rotation of the key switch and a clockwise rotation of the key switch permits a momentary situation. So if I rotate my key counterclockwise, I'm at a momentary. If I rotate it clockwise, the same condition. That means I'm momentary in both instances. I can easily change that function by reviewing that upper right-hand corner that we had just talked about. Magnets can be removed and flipped and reinstalled using a steel tool as shown below. So what happens, these magnets that they're referring to, right at the tip of my finger, you can see it. There's a magnet with a blue dot, or with a dot. Over here, you can see the magnet as well. There, you can see it. And there you can see it. Okay? You recall that the action was momentary. It says you can flip them with a steel tool. Here's the steel tool. You're going to basically insert that steel tool such that the blade makes contact with the top of the magnet. And when you have full contact on the top of the magnet, you can coax it. Oh, you know what it is? This way was easier. You can coax the magnet to come out, is what you can do. Okay? No dot on that side. Dot on the other side. Dot up means momentary. Let's flip this. I'm sure you can already tell what's going to happen. But I flipped that one magnet down so that the dot the dot up, and there is no dot on the other one. Difficult to see, but nonetheless. Now, when I insert my key switch, I can turn it clockwise, and I've got momentary action. I can turn it counterclockwise and get maintained action, where it's held in place. Okay? I've got maintained action. That's simply how you change that functionality. So since this is an 0505, I'm going to go back and reset the magnet so that the customer, when they get this from us, isn't saying, okay, what's going on here? This doesn't work right. So now we've got that placed back in, and we've got momentary on both sides. Okay, now you can switch momentary to maintained on either side. As you look at the table on the back, the digits behind the 653 specifically define momentary or maintained on either side, and whether or not it's single pole double throw or double pole double throw. Okay? And as you study all of that, you will see that there is that typo in the 0405 and the 1415. It should be momentary maintained, momentary maintained. Below that table on the left side, verify switch cover is oriented correctly for switch configuration. Note that only 1, 2, or 4 switches can be installed for proper operation. Now, let's take a look at, see what these micro switches look like. Okay, let's take a look at these switches. So what you'll end up doing is removing the back cover, should you need to, but you probably will not need to, but we're going to because this video is going to cover what these switches look like. There's a couple of screws here. I've got one removed. I've got the other that I'm removing. You'll take note on the second page, bottom left. Verify switch cover is oriented correctly for switch configuration. Note that only 1, 2, or 4 switches can be installed. 3 is not recommended. And we're going to discover why 3 is not recommended. So I pull that cover off. And what we have here is a single pole double throw configuration. Okay. This lock has 2 switches installed. The way to make it double pull, double throw is that you literally will order 2 more micro switches, and I'm just showing you what it would look like if you had another set of 2, and you would stack them like this. And then imagine 2 more down on this side. So there would be 4 of these single pole, double throw switches installed. Now what they're saying here, okay, depending on how I rotate the cam, it's either going to fire one switch or the other. Sorry. Okay, you get the concept of how that works. Now, if you're going to add a couple of switches, you'll notice that it's got DPDT arrow up. Underneath the label here, it'll say SPTD. SPDT. Can't really see it, but point it up. The reason that matters is because these shoulders that are here need to either sit on top of the pair of single switches, or they need to be out of the way of the pair of the double stack switches. So the shoulder that's here at the tip of my finger, right there, it's going to rest on top of the switch body. But if I turned it over, then there would be nothing holding the switch body from moving on the inside, and it would obviously work loose, because you can see right there, it's not in position over the body of the switch. When I flip it over into the proper orientation, You don't really see it real well. Oh, I'm sorry, it's here. This little feature right here is what's pressing that micro switch down. Okay, the point of the matter is we have single pole double throw pointed towards the top, which is underneath the label here. And I am indeed in the correct orientation to operate my switch. I have to tell you that I don't really encounter the installation of 4 switches in one of these units. So to me, it's not very common. And as I put my screws back into my body here to hold that cover down, and you're most likely not going to remove that at all because you're ordering the digits after the part number to give you the proper operation or proper configuration. So it goes to say that if you ordered a 653-1415, it's going to have 4 micro switches in it. Okay, and there of course would be no reason to ever remove that. Now there is, and I should have shown that to you separately, but let's talk about now about the stop pins, which will allow you to work in the right side of that configuration where you've got literally only 1 micro switch installed. Now, we had talked about stop pins earlier. Stop pins are used to prevent the ability or the functionality of removing the key in anything other than the original neutral position of the lock. Meaning, you can't remove the key, except when you have the lock disassembled, meaning the key is captive in the cylinder is what the stop pin function does. Now, installing the stop pins are indicated down here below in this area of the installation instructions. And obviously we've got to remove some parts to be able to get inside of there, but there's really only 2 functions in the sense that there's clockwise rotation for either the single pole double throw or the double pole double throw configuration. So let's get to doing it then. We're going to remove, and while I'm removing these screws, something that someone doesn't need to necessarily watch, I can tell you that the name Locknetics, then Schlage Electronics, or whatever it's called now, meaning it's backed by, whatever they're calling it, doesn't matter, because it's backed by some of the most superb individuals in terms of technical support that I've ever worked with. Okay? So, would be really no problem to remove the micro switches. You can pause that video and study what they look like. Okay. Then at this point we're going to remove these 2 screws. And the point of the technical support people at the company is they are exceptional. When it comes to investing into a system, whether it be something small, like literally a 1-door system. Now, we're talking about the stop magnet, and be mindful. And what I've done is I've removed what I'm calling the back plane. I have removed my rocker or my tail piece. Basically, it's a tail piece, right? And a stop magnet is going to go here or here, depending on what the action is of what you're installing. What I mean to say is what function of key switch you're installing. But the reason I cannot illustrate for you the function of a stop magnet is because I don't have a stop magnet in my packaging. Meaning, I've got an 0505. An 0505 does not incorporate the function of stop magnet, whereas your 04, 05, 14, 15, the 041 and the 141 would employ that because in the upper right-hand corner of page 2, the stop magnet is clearly larger, or thicker, I should say, than the spring magnets. Okay, so now we had to disassemble it anyway to be able to go on to talking about the stop pins, which you can employ as a piece of hardware, as a function. However, you could certainly install one of the stop pins, or both of them for that matter. But what that does is it permits you from removing the key. If you are installing a stop pin in the inverted teardrop shaped tailpiece, that's going to prevent the rotation of the cam from the back of the cylinder, from preventing you from being able to bring that key back to vertical and pulling it out. I've got a stop pin installed on one side. I'm going to insert this key cylinder here, but I'm going to install it so that my cam, I can rotate it. But because of where that stop pin is installed, I can't turn this back to vertical to pull that key out. That means the key is always going to be captive inside of the housing. Why would you want that? Well, you would want that in the event that you cannot suffer anyone else having a copy of this key, meaning, it works something else, or someone could take that key and manipulating it into being something else, like a master key or a different change key. But it strikes me that having a stop pin doesn't make any sense if you don't have a stop magnet. Because you'll be able to rotate the tailpiece, I suppose. Can you? No, actually you can't. Let's test that again. Yeah, well, you could certainly have a clockwise only, or I suppose a counterclockwise only rotation, depending on how you stacked everything, to be able to activate the switch, and then the stop pin preventing your cam from coming out. So you could use it. You could use the stop pin to perform that sort of functionality. But as we review the installation instructions when it comes to the stop magnet, it needs to be installed more so not to prevent the movement of the tailpiece or the cam at all, but it's used exclusively when you have only one micro switch. So there's no reason for the tailpiece to rotate back in that direction. So stop magnet there or not, it's correlated to having one micro switch. Having one or two stop pins would come into effect based on the function of it being the 041 or the 141. Okay. And then to finish up the discussion about stop pins and stop pins in your stop magnet, you're going to use it according to the diagrams where you're literally limiting the rotation to clockwise. The stop magnet will prevent the rotation of this to an area that you don't want it to move to. It will also, used in conjunction with the stop pins, allow you to be key retaining, is what it is. And those stop pins are placed also, of course, or the stop magnets are placed when you're using the proper function with the location of the micro switch placed differently than the, for instance, the 04 location function is, the micro switch is in a different location than the 041. And the combination of the stop pins and the stop magnet allow you to restrict movement and be key retaining, is what it's called. So we've got this all pretty much taken apart here, but because we're not installing stop pins, because our function doesn't call for it, we're going to literally just put this all back together. And I did indeed contact the factory during that video to ask why I didn't have a stop pin, and it dawned on me during that conversation. I don't have a stop pin because of that 0505 function that we've ordered. There would be no reason to have a stop pin, even though I have to admit the installation instructions say that you get the installation instructions say you get everything you need except 2 extra micro switches should you need micro switches. So to me it's a bit unusual that the stop magnet is not included, but the only thing I can come back and resolve on the fact is that, it's not that function, so that's all there is to it. Single pull, double throw is what we're doing. That cap has to go to the top, and we're in good shape. However, when I called technical support, of course, it reinforced my expanding understanding of how excellent the technical support department is at the company that I would know as Locknetics. Schlage Electronics, I think they just have Schlage on the outside name, outside of the box. And they've come a long way with these parts over time. They've taken them from being, this is your guy, Terry. They've taken them from being, you need several different key switch possibilities to having one that will do lots of different functions. Okay, so we are back to original configuration. Momentary on both sides, ready to go. Okay, so in conclusion, there's a link below this video to the manufacturer's page where you can pull up not only all of the Schlage products that we sell, or Locknetics products that we sell, but also a link to the manufacturer's website, as well as a link to the full product catalog. If you have any questions on how to run the 653 series of key switches or any other Locknetics product, please feel free to reach out to us. Thank you.